I thought I had it all, until I discovered my wife and her lover were plotting to destroy me completely, including my money, my identity, and even my daughter. Welcome to the Love and Betrayed Love channel. If you enjoy this story, don't forget to subscribe and give it a thumbs up. My wife 37 and I 39, entered into an open marriage at her request. Now she wants to close it again. My wife and I have been married for 15 years. We have 2 children, a 14-year-old girl and a 12-year-old boy. About a year and a half ago, my wife approached me and asked for an open marriage. She stated that she was bored with just us and wanted to experience more. I was strongly opposed to this, because I believe that marriage should be between 2 people at the same time. When we got married and had 5 sexual partners and my wife had only been with me, she made it clear that we had to open things up or she was going to file for divorce. Neither of us wanted that, so we agreed to certain conditions. Nobody brought anything back to the house. We don't talk about partnerships. The children don't know. Nobody in my family knows all partners have been tested ahead of time. Nobody we know, etc. I had a strong suspicion. My wife had someone in mind and this was confirmed within 24 hours of our agreement. She went outside and did not return until 4:00 a.m. It was difficult for me to accept and I was not comfortable with it, but I wanted to save my marriage. Last May I met Ross. Our daughters are in the marching band together. Ross is divorced and has no desire to get married again. She has needs just like everyone else. So 5 months after reopening the marriage, I started sleeping with Ross. Initially it felt like cheating, but honestly it's nice to have something with no strings attached, even if neither of us wanted it to go forward. Over time I became confident that my wife and I would be able to meet our needs both within and outside of our marriage. It increased the intensity of our sex life and made us happier. In April, my wife and her side guy, whom I had never met, stopped seeing each other due to coronavirus. According to my understanding, he is in an open marriage, his wife is unaware and it was difficult to leave. In May we assisted in organizing a Zoom concert for the band kids, which went extremely well, though my wife met Ross for the first time. I believe Ross has been open with a few of the moms, because we informed my wife that Ross was my outside partner. My wife informed me that since we both knew Ross, I needed to end things with her. I refused, citing the fact that neither of us knew her ahead of time and that meeting did not violate the rules we had established over the previous month. She has repeatedly told me that she is uncomfortable with me continuing to sleep with Ross and that I need to end the arrangement. She was fine for a year with her partner. This weekend she approached me and stated that she wanted to end our marriage again. I told her I was open to it as long as we agreed to keep it closed in the future. She agreed. That is also what she wants, that she does not need any more partners and that she is content. It's just me. I'm not sure we could agree to end the marriage on 2 conditions. The first I described above. The second thing I wanted her to do was sign a document waiving spousal support in the event of divorce. She flipped out. She categorically refused to consider that my wife is a stay-at-home mom who hasn't worked since we married. She said I could keep seeing Ross and leave her with nothing if she signed the agreement. I'm not sure if I'd be willing to include a list of mutually agreed upon situations such as my infidelity. That would render the agreement null and void. She says it's not up for discussion, that she won't be cheated on and left with nothing if I leave her for Ross. I pointed out that the entire thing was her idea and that I was only going along with it to save our marriage. She says that if we don't end the marriage, it's as good as done. I told her that I would not tolerate being threatened with divorce every time she didn't get her way. She says I am being dramatic and I need to focus on us. Should I agree without conditions? I know there is no future with Ross, because we both agreed. It's all physical and despite knowing I'm standing my ground, I feel like I'm destroying my marriage over a dead end. At the same time, I don't think it is about Ross at all. Update based on what some of you said here this morning. I called Ross. You may have heard that we were supposed to keep this private and asked who she would share the details of our liaison with. She denied telling anyone and I didn't suspect she was lying. I checked my wife's Google timeline history and discovered that she had tracked me to Ross's house in April. She followed me and then purposefully introduced herself to Ross to incite conflict. I thought she wanted to be involved in band parents, but she just wanted to end things with my outside partner. I'm not sure what to do at this point. Let's ask the community for some relevant feedback. First and foremost, I believe your wife flipped because she has no intention of staying with you long term. The op responded. That's exactly what I thought. Believe me, my intent is not to defraud her financially. She's coming from the perspective that she's confident in us now and ready to wrap things up. What about a year or two from now, when she decides she wants someone else and wants to open things back up? I'm not going to be blackmailed into a divorce just because she wants it both ways. Another community member claims your marriage is already over. Good luck. The op replies. I am coming to that realization. I hate it, but she is no longer the person I married. Someone else joins in while he is in an open marriage. His wife is unaware, so he is simply cheating on her. Then the op replies, yes, apparently my wife believed it was open. He told her it was true and he was openly cheating on his wife. If his wife still wanted to end the marriage and whether the divorce would proceed, I first asked if she was willing to agree that once closed, it would stay closed. Then I asked her if she would agree to waive spousal support in the event of divorce. Then I asked if she'd be willing to waive it in specific circumstances such as her cheating on me or refusing to reopen the marriage. She refused to discuss it. I don't want to be in a situation where her outside partner wants to resume their relationship 6 months from now, or she sees someone else she's interested in and decides to threaten me with divorce again if I do not agree to open the marriage. Please back out. I have no intention of financially exploiting her. I wanted to see how she'd react to my request for a guarantee that she wouldn't ask me that again. She made it clear that she was not going to put her money where her mouth is. The op describes how he met Ross. I met Ross through band parents. Our daughters aren't particularly close. They just play in the same band. My wife was not involved in band at all because it was not her thing with quarantine. In effect, she was looking for things to do and decided she wanted to help with the concert. At that point she should have said no, because my outside partner is a band mom and I don't want you to be involved in that circle. She was in my circle, not my wise. My wife had no involvement with the band until May, a full year after I set Ross. As it turned out, there was a very specific reason for my wife's sudden decision to join the band. I became involved with Ross in May of 2019. She's been with her guys since December of 2018. Your wife wants an open marriage, in which the open sign only applies to her when her side of the bed gets cold. She's ready to leave, but she wants you to stay as a loyal pet should you agree to the terms. Oh no, it is not about Ross. It's about setting boundaries and not allowing her to yank your chain whenever she gets an itch. If she can't handle the rules she helped establish, perhaps it's time to let her ride away into the sunset solo. To recap, my wife expressed a desire for an open marriage. I didn't, but I agreed when she said she was planning to file for divorce. She found an outside partner within 24 hours. It took me several months. Her relationship with her partner has ended. She stopped me and introduced herself to my partner in an attempt to force me to end it. When that failed, she demanded that the marriage be closed again. I imposed conditions that she was unwilling to accept. Now we'll move on to the last month. It's been a very difficult month. I confronted my wife regarding the stalking. She denied it at first, but I brought up her location history. She tried to deflect by claiming that I had invaded her privacy, but the bait was not taken. Finally, she admitted that she disliked the fact that I had someone on my side while she did not, and that a mother at the school felt too close to home. I agreed to end things with Ross if she agreed to counseling, ended the marriage permanently and began looking for work to help with household expenses. She replied that she is a stay-at-home mom. I told her we could go back after the coronavirus had passed, but she couldn't just stay at home once things returned to normal. We had a few therapy sessions and everything went well. At first, therapist pressed her on why she had followed me. When I asked her why she felt she needed to leave the marriage, she addressed almost everything that was on my mind. Then everything went south. She admitted that her outside partner was a former high school boyfriend. They had broken up before anything happened and then reconnected. She regretted not going all the way with him in high school and resolved to pursue her desire. I was pissed. I told her that if choosing a mom from school is too close to home, then her choice of a married ex-boyfriend was completely unacceptable. I said I didn't want to look at her. I checked into a hotel to cool down because I didn't want my children to see me like that. I stayed there for a few days before returning home to deal with the remaining issues in our marriage. When I got home, I noticed that my daughter was acting unusually cold toward me. Even for a 14-year-old girl, she was extremely dismissive. I asked her what was going on. She blamed me for cheating on mom with a bad mom. I asked her where she had heard this. She refused to tell me at first, claiming it didn't matter, but eventually admitted her mother had informed her that I was staying at my girlfriend's house. After I left, I mentally counted 10. I told her it was not true. I showed her the hotel receipt for my phone and told her that her mother and I had a fight and that I had decided to take some time away to calm down. She cried a lot and I reassured her that I loved her and would always love her, despite the fact that I was on fire inside. I tried to remain calm. I did not even go to my wife. I went to Facebook and found the guy's wife. I messaged her and informed her that her husband had been having an affair with my wife for the past year and a half, and I'd be happy to send her any proof she prefers. She was grateful and had a feeling something was up. A few hours later, my wife screamed at me, claiming that I had violated the confidentiality of our therapy by writing the guy's life. I asked what she meant by informing our daughter that I had a girlfriend. She denied it and continues to deny that she told her anything other than the fact that I was away for a few days. This happened last Thursday. We haven't spoken since we're supposed to have another counseling session tomorrow, but I'm not sure if it's worth going. I keep catching her in lies and I'm not sure I'll ever be able to trust her again. I understand that filing for divorce is the best option at this point, but just thinking about it makes me sick. I feel like a failure, because I was unable to make my marriage work. I know where it will end up. I just feel like throwing up every time I try to call an attorney. Now let us quickly check in for some comments. First and foremost, I appreciate the update. Starting her therapy is only bringing more things to light, and your wife's immersion in her sea of lies has clearly shattered her trust in her completely. For the sake of the kids, I hope your wife did not tell your daughter that. However, when people are sinking fast, they will latch on to anyone to keep them afloat, and turning the children against you isn't exactly a novel strategy. You are not a failure just because your marriage has ended. At this point, it's probably best to contact that attorney, regardless of how difficult it is. Do it for yourself, do it for your children, even do it for your wife, so she can reach rock bottom on her own without destroying your lives. Good luck, man. Someone else had this to say: speak to an attorney. If you are honest with yourself. Your wife started the relationship after she had or was planning to cheat when things failed. She didn't want you to have fun while she didn't. She does not contribute to the household and has no plans to. She constantly lies. What makes you believe that anything will work to resolve this? When someone shows you who they are, trust them. It's her way or the highway. So, as I previously stated, I needed to speak with an attorney. Get your finances in order and leave this awful relationship. One more community member has something to say. You did not fail. Your wife wanted to cheat, but did not want to call it that. She never asked or expected you to do the same. The fact that she threatened to divorce you if you didn't comply is extremely manipulative. The fact that she attempted to harm your relationship with your daughter is the final straw. Personally, I don't believe this situation is fixable, but never blame yourself for any of this. Is all about your wife going off the rails and you tried to hold on for dear life. But perhaps it is time to let go also. I would be completely honest with your daughter about the entire situation. Everything will come out eventually. So here's the true story. Rather than rumors and lies. It is much healthier an ex-boyfriend. Wow, that certainly changes the game. I see you're going back for seconds. Follow the advice of the wise commentators. Lawyer up and get out of there for the sake of you and the children. The circus tent must be packed up. Allow your wife to reach rock bottom on her own. I don't believe you are the problem here. It appears that you attempted to make the marriage work by making her happy and agreeing to her sick and twisted games. But now that's enough. Here is the next story. I stood in front of the mirror and adjusted my tie another day. Another transaction to close life was good, or so I thought. My reflection looked back at me, confident and composed Alex Thompson, the man who had everything honey. Did you see my blue folder? Crystal's voice came from the bedroom. Check out the study. I called back our daughter. Victoria rushed into the room. Her pigtails bounced. Dad. Can we go to the park after school? I knelt down and met her eager gaze. Of course, princess, I'll pick you up at 3:30 sharp. Laura appeared at the doorway. Her expression is distracted. I have a late meeting tonight. Don't stay up for dinner. I frowned again. It's the third time this week. She waved her hand dismissively. You understand how it is. The Henderson account is crucial. Something in her tone didn't seem right, but I put the thought aside. All right, I will take care of Victoria. Laura rushed out, barely stopping to kiss Victoria goodbye. I could not shake the feeling that something was wrong. She had grown increasingly distant in recent weeks. Our once passionate relationship had cooled to tepid small talk and perfunctory gestures at work. I found it difficult to concentrate. My thoughts kept going back to Crystal's behavior, the cancelled plans and early departures. She avoided my touch. It felt like living with a stranger. My phone vibrated. Laura sent a text saying she was running late. Do not pick up Victoria. Tracy will drop her off. I sighed and rubbed my temples. This was not the first time Laura had abandoned her daughter. Victoria's disappointed expression flashed through my mind and a surge of rage rose in my chest. As I drove home, I chose to confront Crystal. This could not go on. Our family was falling apart and I needed answers. When I arrived, the house was completely dark. There is no sign of Victoria or Crystal. I checked my watch. 7:30 p.m. Where were they? I called Trace's number, Crystal's close friend. Hey, Tracy, this is Alex. Is Victoria with you? Oh, hello, Alex. Trace's tone was overly cheerful. Yes, she's here. Laura asked me to keep her for a sleepover, didn't she tell you? I tightened my grip on the phone. No, she did not. Where's Crystal? She claimed she had a work dinner. I'm sure she'll get home soon. Trace's voice conveyed the lie. Thank you, Tracy. Tell Victoria. You adore her. Hanging up. I felt a cold dread settle into my stomach. Laura was not at work. She was not with our daughter. Where in the hell was she? I paced the living room, various scenarios running through my head. Was she in trouble, having an affair? The thought caused my blood to boil. Hours have passed. I called Crystal's phone several times, each time going straight to voicemail. By midnight, I was ready to contact the police. At 1:00 a.m., I heard the front door open. Laura stumbled in with disheveled hair and wrinkled clothes. Where have you been? I demanded. My voice was low and controlled. She jumped, startled by my appearance. Alex, I told you that I had a late meeting. Don't lie to me. I growled, moving closer. I called your office. They said you left at 5. Crystal's eyes darted across the room, avoiding my gaze. I went for a drink with some colleagues. I lost track of time and your phone. Why didn't you respond? The battery died. She mumbled, pushing past me into the bedroom. I grabbed her arm and forced her to face me. What's happening, Crystal? And don't say it's nothing. you have been acting strangely for weeks." For a brief moment, I saw fear in her eyes. Then it was gone cold. Defiance has replaced the previous attitude. "I don't need to explain myself to you." Alex let go of me. I released her arm. Her voice was filled with venom, which shocked me. This was not the woman I married. As she stormed off to the bedroom, I stood there feeling as if my whole world was collapsing around me. Sleep eluded me that night. I lay awake, replaying every interaction, excuse and missed call. The pieces were falling into place, creating an image I did not want to see. My wife was hiding something and I was going to find out what it was, whatever the cost. The following few days were a blur of suspicion and unspoken tension. Laura and I barely spoke, dancing around each other like nervous strangers. I threw myself into work, but my mind was preoccupied with finding out the truth. One evening, as Laura was getting ready to leave, I casually asked, "Where are you going?" "Book club." She replied without looking at me. I nodded and watched her rush out the door. As soon as her car drove away, I grabbed my keys. It was time to put an end to this charade. It wasn't easy to follow Crystal's car. She took the roundabout route, doubling back several times, but I was prepared for this. I kept my distance, my heart pounding as we left our neighborhood's familiar streets. Crystal's car eventually pulled into the parking lot of the Rosewood Hotel. A pit formed in my stomach as I watched her walk out, smoothing her dress and checking her reflection in the car window. I parked across the street. My hands were shaking as I took out my phone to record. Laura entered the hotel lobby. Her eyes scanned the room. Then I saw him, a tall, well-dressed man with sandy hair. He approached Laura with a familiarity that set my blood boiling. Toby Rowe. I recognized him from Crystal's professional events. The way he placed his hand on the small of her back. The intimate smile they exchanged. That was all the confirmation I needed. I wanted to storm in there and confront them both. However, a cold, calculating part of my brain held me back. I needed more evidence and leverage for the next hour. I sat in my car, photographing and recording snippets of their conversation as they passed by the windows. When they finally emerged, each laugh and touch pierced my heart like a knife. Toby pulled Laura close. I'm kissing her deeply. I gripped my steering wheel so tightly that my knuckles turned white as Laura drove away. She fought the urge to run them both down. I followed Toby. He took me to an upscale apartment complex across town. I took note of the address. My mind is already working out a plan. The next day I called in sick while Laura was at work. I paid Tracy a visit. It was time for some answers. Tracy opened the door. Her fake smile faltered as she noticed my expression. Alex, what are you doing here? I pushed past her and entered the house. We need to talk, Tracy, now. She wrung her hands nervously. I don't understand what you mean. Cut the crap, I snapped. I know about Toby. I know Laura has been lying. I don't know how long you've been covering for her. Tracy's face wrinkled. Alex, I'm very sorry. I wanted to tell you, but Laura made me a promise. Tell me everything, I demanded. My voice is cold, and so the entire sordid story spilled out. Laura and Toby had been having an affair for several months. They were going to run away together. They're taking Victoria with them. She was about to leave you bankrupt. Tracy sobbed. Toby has been assisting her with financial transactions. They plan to drain your accounts and disappear. I listened in stony silence, each word fueling the growing rage within me. Tracy finished and I stood up. Alex, what are you planning to do? She inquired, fear in her eyes. I looked at her. My voice unusually calm. Tracy, you have nothing to worry about, but if you say anything about this conversation to anyone, especially Crystal, you will regret it, understood? She nodded, tears streaming down her cheeks. As I drove to Toby's apartment, my thoughts were crystal clear. The pain, the betrayal, It all converged into a single goal. They believed they could destroy me. I'd show them the destruction. Toby's building lacked security. It was almost too easy to get inside. I picked the lock on his door, an old skill that was finally coming in handy. The apartment was sleek and modern, and it smelled like overpriced cologne. A thought went through drawers and files, photographing in anything that might be useful, including bank statements, emails and love letters from Crystal. Each discovery fueled my rage. I was so preoccupied with my task that I almost didn't hear the key in the lock. Panic surged through me as I realized Toby had arrived home early. There was nowhere to hide. As the door opened, I made a split-second decision. I took a heavy Laura paperweight off the desk and positioned myself behind the door. Toby entered, humming to himself as he turned to close the door. I hit the paperweight with a sickening thud and Toby crumpled to the floor for a moment. I stood there frozen in shock. Then training began. I checked for a pulse. It was going. I muttered this was not part of the plan, but as I looked at Toby's lifeless body, a strange calm came over me. In a way, he simplified things. I surveyed the room. My mind raced. I couldn't undo what I'd done, but I could shape the narrative where fast I rearranged the apartment to simulate a botched robbery. I took some money and valuables, smashed a window and wiped down everything I touched as I left. I felt no remorse or guilt, just satisfaction. Toby had attempted to take everything from me. In the end, I had taken everything from him. Now it was Crystal's turn. The following few days were a delicate balancing act. I had to play the unsuspecting husband while carefully hiding my tracks. The news of Toby's death spread quickly, shocking Crystal's social circle. I watched her closely, taking note of every flinch and poorly concealed tear. She was good at concealing her grief, but not enough for the world. She was a concerned colleague. For me, she was a widow in all but name. What a tragedy, Laura murmured as she pushed food around her plate at dinner. Toby was an invaluable member of the team. I nodded solemnly and took a sip of wine. Indeed, the police claim it was a robbery. Crystal's hand trembled slightly when she reached for her glass. That's what they are saying. It just doesn't make sense. Life is often like that. I responded, my voice devoid of emotion. Crystal's behavior worsened over time. Erratic, she alternated between eerie calm and outbursts of anger or tears. I knew she would eventually crack. I needed an ally, someone I could fully trust. That's when I contacted my best friend Ethan. Ethan and I have known each other since we were in law enforcement training. He left the force to start his own security company, but he still had connections. More importantly, he was the only person I knew I could trust. We met in a quiet bar on the outskirts of town. Ethan took one look at me and ordered a bottle of whiskey. "Okay, amigo," he said, pouring us each a generous measure. "Don't hold back." I told him everything, the affair, the plot against me, and finally what happened to Toby. Ethan listened silently. His expression unreadable. When I finished, he gave a long, low whistle. "Damn s. That's a huge mess." "I understand." I said this while drinking my drink, "but I need your help, Ethan. I cannot go down for this. I have Victoria to think about." Ethan leaned back, his gaze shrewd. "What do you need?" "An alibi for what happened the night Toby died, and any advice how to keep ahead of the investigation." For a long time, Ethan just stared at me, then nodded. "All right, but you following my lead." No questions were asked. "I get it." Relief washed over me. "I get it. Thank you, Ethan." Over the next few hours we meticulously built my alibi. Ethan could swear we were together that night. I'm working late on a new security system for my company. We went over every detail to ensure our stories were perfectly aligned. Ethan spoke quietly and seriously. "You must get rid of anything that could connect you to Toby's place. Clothing and shoes. Everything burn it if necessary. I nodded and committed his instructions to memory. And Alex, he said, gripping my arm. Whatever happens, you stay true to the story. Even if they bring in Crystal. You have no idea what will happen if she cracks. Understood. I said I understand. As I drove home that night, I felt a strange combination of fear and exhilaration. The game had changed. It wasn't just about revealing Laura anymore. It was about surviving. The following few weeks were a tight RPP walk. At work, I kept a facade of normally while closing deals and charming clients, but inside I was constantly on edge, waiting for the other shoe to drop. Crystal's pregnancy announcement came as a shock when she cornered me one evening, her eyes wild and desperate. "I'm pregnant, Alex," she exclaimed. It is our miracle." I felt blood draining from my face. A miracle, the cruest the timing, the desperate tone in her voice. I had no doubt about whose child she was carrying. Laura threw her arms around me and sobbed. I held her rigidly, my heart turning to stone. She believed this would save her, find me to her. She had no idea the storm was coming, as Laura backed away, wiping her eyes. I made a decision for the time being. I would play along. Let her believe she had won. However, she would eventually lose everything, just as she had planned for me. "We should celebrate," I said with a forced smile. "I will make dinner reservations for tomorrow." Laura was beaming. Relief could be seen in her eyes. "Oh, Alex," I was worried. I reflected on our recent distance. I cued her face. "My touch is cold, but the gesture is loving nonsense. This changes everything." As I held my unfaithful wife, my mind was already several steps ahead. The child complicated things, but it also created new opportunities. If it was a paternity test would be damning proof if it were mine. The custody battle would be a lot more interesting. Later that night, while Laura slept peacefully beside me, I stared at the ceiling, my thoughts racing. The man I had once trusted, who was optimistic and perhaps even naive, was no longer with me. He was replaced by someone harsher and colder, someone who would do anything to protect what he had. I thought of Victoria, who was innocent and unconcerned about the chaos all around her. I'd shield her from the worst of it, but I knew the next few months would change her life forever. The guilt weighed heavily on me, but it was overshadowed by a more intense emotion. Determination. Laura and Toby had attempted to destroy me and tear my family apart. Instead, they'd unleash something they hadn't anticipated. I would get my revenge and justice, and when the dust settled, I'd rebuild my life on the ruins of their betrayal. As dawn broke, I finally fell asleep in my dreams. I stood triumphant over the ruins of Crystal's meticulously planned lies. It was a vision for the future when I was determined to make it a reality. The knock on my office door interrupted my thoughts. I looked up to see Detective Tom Harris standing in the doorway, his keen eyes focusing on every detail of my work pace. "Mr. Thompson," he said, his tone gruff but professional. "I'm Detective Harris. I was hoping we could discuss Toby Rowe." I motioned toward the chair across from my desk. My face is a mask of polite concern. "Of course, Detective, please take a seat." As Philip settled in, I noticed how his gaze swept over my face, looking for any indication of nervousness or guilt. I met his eyes, determined not to give him anything. "Mr. Thompson, where were you?" "On the night of July 15th, Harris asked, taking out a notepad. I leaned back in my chair. The picture of comfort. "I was working late with my friend Ethan Witt. My company is currently implementing a new security system. Can anyone else confirm that?" I shake my head, "Just Santos. We were the only people in the office that night." Harris scribbled something down his face. "Unreadable. And what is your relationship with Mr. Rowe?" "I understand he worked alongside your wife." "Pure professionalism," I responded smoothly. We had met at a few work functions, but I didn't know him very well. The detective's eyes narrowed slightly. Your wife appears to be quite upset by his death. I allowed a worried expression to cross my face. Laura has always been sensitive. She is devastated by any death, particularly that of a colleague. I see, Harris murmured. He paused and asked Mr. Thompson, "Are you aware that Mr. Rowe made several large cash withdrawals in the weeks leading up to his death?" My heart rate increased, but my expression remained neutral. "No, I was not aware." "Is this significant?" Harris shrugged. "Could be nothing. However, in my experience, when people start moving large sums of money, they usually have a plan." I leaned forward and spoke with just the right amount of curiosity. "What exactly are we planning?" "That is what we are trying to figure out." Harris replied by standing up. "Thank you for your time, Mr. Thompson. We'll be in touch if we have any further questions." As I watched him leave, I realized this wasn't over. Harris was too sharp. I'd need to tread carefully. Later that evening I returned home to find Crystal pacing in the living room. Her face was pale and drawn. "Alex," she explained, her voice trembling. "The police were present. They asked a lot of questions about Toby." I drew her into an embrace and felt her shake against me. "It's okay, Crystal, they're simply doing their job." She drew back, her eyes wild. "But what happens if they find out what?" If I grabbed her shoulders, my voice is firm. "Find out what, Crystal? We have nothing to hide." The lie hung between us, heavy and unspoken. Crystal's eyes darted away, unable to meet my gaze. "I just meant about the project we were working on," she mumbled. "It was confidential." I nodded and pretended to accept her flimsy excuse. "Do not worry, everything will be fine." Laura retreated to her bedroom. I poured myself a drink, my mind raced. The investigation was moving faster than I had expected. I needed to speed up my plans. I took out my phone and dialed Ethan. "We need to talk." I responded as soon as he answered. "Things are heating up." "Ethan." His voice was low and serious. "This is my place, 1 hour, come alone." I arrived at Ethan's apartment exactly 1 hour later. He ushered me in, quickly scanning the hallway before closing the door. "What's going on?" he inquired, pouring and taking a shot of tequila. I downed mine in one gulp, enjoying the burn. "Detective Harris is onto something. He knows about Toby's cash withdrawals." Ethan cursed beneath his breath. "That complicates matters. We need to throw him off track." "How?" I asked as I refilled my glass. "Ethan." His eyes shone with a dangerous light. "I have some contacts in the department. Perhaps we can plant some evidence and point them in another direction." I paused. "That is risky, Ethan. If we are caught and we do nothing, you will be charged with murder." Ethan snapped. "Is this what you want?" The word lingered in the air between us. Murder. What I had done finally had a name, and its weight threatened to crush me. But then I remembered Crystal's betrayal of the life she and Toby planned to take from me. "Do it," I said with a cold voice. "Whatever it takes." Ethan smiled as he nodded. "That's my boy. So here's what we're going to do." As Ethan outlined his plan, I felt a strange combination of fear and exhilaration. There was no going back now. The game had changed and I was fully committed. When I returned home, the house was quiet. Laura already asleep, or is pretending to be. I made my way into the study. I need a moment to clear my head. As I settled into my chair, I noticed a stack of papers on Crystal's desk. Something about them bothered me. I should not look. I knew that, but the investigator and me couldn't resist. Carefully, I started sifting through the documents. The majority were mundane work papers, but then I discovered a hidden compartment in the desk drawer full of letters and printed emails. My hands trembled as I read through them. Each was driving a knife deeper into my heart. "My dearest Toby," one letter began. I can't wait to begin our new lives together. Alex suspects nothing. Another email outlined their plans. His accounts will disappear. Once we drain them, he will be left with nothing, just as he deserves. The cruelty of their scheme struck me as a physical blow. They hadn't just decided to leave me. They wanted to completely destroy me. As I read on, my shock turned into rage. How dare they? After everything I had given Crystal, everything we had built together. I was so caught up in the letters that I didn't hear the study door open. Alex Crystal's voice caused me to jump. What are you doing now? I turned slowly. The damning evidence was clutched in my hand. Crystal's eyes widened when she realized what I had discovered. Allow me to justify myself. She started, but I interrupted her with a harsh laugh. Justify what, Crystal? How you and your lover intended to ruin me? How are you going to take my daughter, my money and everything? Crystal's face wrinkled. It was not like that, Toby. He convinced me. Don't blame it on him. I snarled and stood up. Every word here belongs to you, your plan and betrayal. Laura began to cry. Alex, please, I made an error. We can work it out. I looked at her. I looked at her and felt nothing but contempt. This woman, whom I loved and trusted, was unknown to me. Now, work it out. I spoke, my voice dangerously quiet. We'll work it out, but not in the way you hoped. Laura stepped back. Fear flashed across her eyes. What do you mean? I smiled and I noticed her flinch at the coldness of it. You wanted to take everything from me, Crystal. Now I'm going to return the favor. You cannot, she whispered. What about the baby? Yes, the baby. I interrupted. Crystal, is this even mine, or is this just part of your sick game? Laura's silence was all I needed. I laughed bitterly. Get out of my sight. I turned back to face the desk and Crystal, do not even think about running. You will not get far. I heard her stifled sobs as she fled the room, but I felt no sympathy. All I felt was an intense desire for justice, or was it vengeance? The following morning I called Ethan. I need your assistance again. I spoke without preamble. I discovered more evidence about Crystal. Ethan let out a low whistle. Damn s. What are you planning? I want to destroy her. I said with a cold voice. Legally, financially, completely. Can you help? There was a pause, then Ethan chuckled darkly. Oh, I can help. All right, meet me in an hour. We have work to do. As I hung up, I noticed my reflection in the window. The man staring back at me was harder and colder than Alex Thompson from a few weeks ago, but he was also stronger and prepared for war. The plan Ethan and I devised was elegant in its simplicity. We would make Crystal believe I was about to confess everything to the police. The fear of being exposed would drive her to desperate measures, leading her right into our trap. I started by dropping hints, leaving files about Toby's case all over the house. I made hushed phone calls within Crystal's earshot, vaguely discussing coming clean and facing the consequences. The impact on Crystal was immediate and dramatic. She became agitated, her eyes darting around as if expecting the police to break in at any moment. One evening, as we sat at the dinner table in tense silence, I decided to take things a step further. I can't do it anymore, Crystal. I replied. My voice heavy with faint guilt, lies and secrets. It is eating me alive. Crystal's fork clattered onto her plate. What exactly are you talking about, Alex? I met her gaze steadily. I think it's time I spoke with Detective Harris. Tell him all I know. Crystal's face lost its color. Everything you know. What is this about, Toby? I spoke softly about you. Laura leapt to her feet, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. You cannot, Alex, please think of Victoria. I slowly stood up, my face crumpled in anguish. I'm thinking of Victoria, She deserves to know the truth, even if it hurts. As I turned to exit the room, I could hear Crystal's sharp intake of breath. Then a searing pain erupted in the back of my head. I stumbled, turning to see Laura standing there with a heavy vase in her hands. Her eyes were wild and desperate. "I refuse to let you ruin everything," she hissed and raised her voice again, but I was prepared this time. I ducked under her swing and tackled her to the ground. We fought on the ground, Crystal, clawing and scratching like a cornered animal. I finally pinned her arms above her head. My face is inches from hers. "It is over, Crystal. I know everything." She collapsed beneath me, tears streaming down her face. "How did you find out?" I laughed bitterly. "You were not as clever as you thought. I found your letters, your email addresses. I know everything about your plans." With Toby, Crystal's eyes widened in shock, before narrowing in fury. "You had no rights." "I had every right to snarl. You intended to destroy me. Take my daughter, my money, my life. You do not understand." Laura sobbed. "Toby and I were in love. We desired a fresh start." I released her arms, stood up and looked down at her disgusted, "And that justifies ruining me. Taking Victoria from her father." Laura fought to sit up, her voice pleading, "Alex, please, we can resolve this. For Victoria's sake, do not use our daughter as a bargaining chip." I snapped. "You gave up that right when you plotted to take her away from me." I pulled out my phone and showed her the screen. The voice recorder app had been running the whole time. Crystal's face crumpled as she realized she had fallen into a trap. "What are you planning to do?" I smiled coldly. "Crystal, I will take everything you have planned for me, your money and reputation. Victoria is in custody. You will be left with nothing." "You cannot," she whispered. "Pay attention to me," I replied, turning toward the door. "Oh, and Crystal, do not bother trying to run. Ethan has been watching the house. You aren't going anywhere." As I walked away, leaving Laura sobbing on the floor, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. The truth was out, and now I could finally begin to regain control of my life. But as I got into my car and drove to Ethan's house, I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't over. Detective Harris was still out there, getting closer to the truth. Each day, I gripped the steering wheel firmly, no matter what happened next. I was prepared. Laura and Toby had reawakened something within me, a ruthless determination to protect what was mine, regardless of the cost. As I approached Ethan's apartment, I noticed him waiting outside. He smiled. "It's finished?" he asked. As I got out of the car, I nodded and held up my phone. "I have all on tape." She admitted everything. Ethan clapped my shoulder. "Good day, man. Now let us go inside and plan our next move. Something tells me we're not yet out of the woods." As we entered his apartment, I felt a strange combination of exhaustion and exhilaration. The game had changed and the stakes were higher than ever. However, for the first time since the beginning of this nightmare, I felt in control. Laura, Toby, Detective Harris. They didn't know who they were dealing with, but they were about to find out. As we examined the evidence, we'd gathered the dim light in Ethan's apartment cast long shadows. Photographs, bank statements and Crystal's damning emails were spread out on the coffee table. Something is not adding up, I muttered and rubbed my temples. The withdrawals from Toby's account are too precise to calculate. Ethan leaned in, his brow furrowed. "What are your thoughts?" I pointed out a series of transactions. "Look at the pattern. It is almost like as if someone was setting him up." Ethan finished, his gaze widening. A shiver ran down my spine as the pieces began to fall into place. "Ethan, what if Toby hasn't died?" Ethan stepped back, shocked expression on his face. "But you said." "I know what I think I saw," I interrupted. "What if it was staged? What if this was all part of a big scam?" Shook his head. "That's an extremely long shot. Why would Toby fake his own death? I stood up and paced the room, my mind racing. Think about it. A perfect crime. He blames me for his murder, runs off with Laura and my money. They begin a new life somewhere. I am unable to touch them, but Crystal is still here. Ethan made a point. Is she accounted, or is she simply waiting for the right time to disappear? Ethan, his eyes narrowed. If you're correct, we need to move quickly. Where do we start? I took out my phone and dialed a number I hope to never use again. We start by requesting some favors. It's time to delve deeper into Toby Rose. After hours fueled by coffee and desperation, we got our answer. Toby Rowe wasn't simply alive. He was a ghost, a master of disguise with a slew of aliases and cons spanning 3 continents. I will be damned. Ethan whispered as we looked at the evidence. He played us all. Anger surged through me, hot and fierce. Not yet, he hasn't. We are going to beat him at his own game. Ethan looked at me with admiration in his eyes. What's going on, boss? I smiled. A plan is already being formed. We are going to catch a dead man. The following morning, I cornered Crystal in the kitchen. Her eyes were red-rimmed and her movements shaky as she poured her coffee. We need to talk. I spoke in a low control tone. Laura flinched. Alex, please, I have told you everything. I leaned against the counter and fixed her with a hard stare. Have you? Because I believe you have left out an important detail. Her hands trembled. Coffee spilled over the rim of her mug. I'm not sure what you're talking about. Toby is alive, right? I said, watching her reaction carefully. Crystal's face lost its color for a moment. I thought she was going to faint. To my surprise, she laughed in a hollow, bitter tone. Did you figure it out? She said, slumping into a chair. I should have known you would. I sat across from her. My voice cool. Start talking. Laura, tell me everything. I mean everything, and so the entire sordid story spilled out. Toby's true identity, their elaborate plan to frame me and flee with my fortune with every word. My anger grew, but so did my determination. Where is he now? I demanded that she finish. Laura shakes her head. I do not know. He was supposed to contact me. Her voice trailed off. Fear flashed in her eyes. I stood up and loomed over her. Listen closely, Crystal. You're going to help me find him, and when we do, you'll play your part. Perfectly understand. She nodded. Tears were streaming down her face. What are you planning to do? I smiled with a predatory gleam in my eyes. I'm going to give Toby exactly what he wants, then take everything from him. I left the kitchen. My phone broke a text message from Ethan. Detective Harris is sniffing around again. We need to move quickly. I typed a quick reply. Set it up. It's time to put an end to this. I attended the meeting, leaving Victoria and Laura with Tracy. We explained everything to Detective Harris, using the evidence we gathered. He was suspicious of us at first, but as he pieced together the puzzle, he realized what we had discovered and was shocked. Before we wrap up the meeting, Tracy Alex gave me a terrifying phone call. Toby came to the house. He forced Victoria and Lorado join him. He gave me an address and said you should come alone with all of your savings and money. He also warned you to come alone. I was shocked. I explained everything to Detective Harris and Ethan. Detective Harris immediately organized a rescue team and gave me instructions. After an hour we were ready to take down Toby. The pieces were in place. It was time for the final act in this twisted game. The warehouse loomed before me, casting a hulking shadow across the night sky. My heart raced as I approached. I was keenly aware of the wire hidden beneath my shirt and the gun tucked into my waistband. Santo's voice crackled in my earpiece. Remember, we have eyes on every exit. If Toby appears, we'll get him. I took a deep breath, bracing myself. Even if he doesn't, we still have Crystal's confession. Whatever happens, this will end tonight. I pushed open the rusted door and stepped into the vast space. Moonlight filtered through broken window, casting eerie shadows on abandoned machinery. Crystal, I called out, my voice echoing, I'm here. Where are you now? A muffled SOB greeted me. I turned a corner to find Crystal tied to a chair. Her face was streaked with tears and mascara. Alex. She cried, thank God you are here. He threatened to finish Victoria if I did not cooperate. I dashed to her side, making a show of inspecting her bonds. Who, Crystal? Who did it? That be me, a familiar voice rang out. I spun around to face Toby step out from behind the stack of crates. A gun is trained on us. The sight of him, alive and smirking, sent a wave of rage through me. Toby, I let out a growl, or should I say James Moriarty, that is your real name, right? Toby's eyes widened slightly then narrowed. Aren't you full of surprises, Alex? I must say I am impressed. I straightened up and moved away from Crystal. The game is over, Toby. The police are on the way. He laughed with a cold, mirthless sound. Oh, I do not think so. You see, I have an insurance policy. He jerked his head toward a dark corner. Come out, sweetheart. My blood ran cold as Victoria stepped into view, her small hand clutched by a burly man. I did not recognize Daddy. Victoria's voice trembled. What's happening? I stepped forward, my hands. Rose. Let her go. Toby. This is between us. Toby grin broadened. To the contrary. Alex, it's always been about family, your family, to be exact. What do you want? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Toby replied, what I've always wanted, your money, your life, your identity, and now, because of your meddling, I'll have to take your daughter. We can't leave any loose ends. You understand. Laura let out a strangled cry, Toby. No, you promised. Toby's face twisted with disgust. Shut up, Crystal, you have outlived your usefulness. In that moment, several events occurred at once. Toby swung his gun toward Crystal. I lunged forward, tackling him to the ground, and through my earpiece I heard Ethan shout. The warehouse erupted into chaos. Police officers rushed in from every direction. The man holding Victoria became quickly overwhelmed. I wrestled with Toby on the floor, fighting for control of the gun. It is over, Toby. I grunted while pinning his arm. Give up. Toby's eyes blazed with fury. Never. He snarled and headbutted me. I reeled back. My grip loosened. Toby scrambled up. The gun is raised. Time seemed to slow, as I saw his finger tighten on the trigger. Then one shot rang out. Toby's eyes widened with shock. He collapsed to the ground. After looking down at the spreading red stain on his chest, I turned to see Detective Harris lower his weapon. You are correct, Mr. Thompson. I nodded, still dazed. Harris assured me that Victoria was safe. We've got her. As the adrenaline wore off, I realized how serious the situation was. I sagged against a nearby crate watching paramedics rush to Toby's aid. Ethan appeared at my elbow. His expression filled with concern. You did it. It is over. I shake my head, my gaze fixed on Crystal as she was led away in handcuffs. Not yet, there's still one more thing to do. In the days that followed, the truth came out. Christ, facing a mountain of evidence, confessed to everything. Her testimony, along with the evidence we had gathered, was sufficient to clear my name completely. As I sat in my lawyer's office signing the final divorce papers, I experienced a strange range of emotions. Relief, undoubtedly, but also a deep, lingering rage at the betrayal I'd suffered. Mr. Thompson, my lawyer said, interrupting my thoughts. There's one more matter to discuss. Your ex-wife. She is requesting visitation rights for Victoria. I looked up, my jaw clenched. Absolutely not. She forfeited that right when she put our daughter in danger. The attorney nodded. I suspected you would say that I'll have the paperwork prepared to ensure that full custody remains with you. I left the office feeling lighter than I had in months. The nightmare was over. Toby was dead. Laura faced years in prison. Most importantly, Victoria remained safe. I drove to pick up my daughter from Ethan's house. My mind is already turning to the future. We had a great deal of healing to do, Victoria and I, but we do it together, strong for having gotten through this ordeal. As I pulled into Ethan's driveway, Victoria burst out the front door. Her face lit up at the sight of me. I scooped her up into my arms and held her tight, ready to go home. Princess? I inquired, my voice filled with emotion. Victoria nodded against my chest. Can we get some ice cream on the way? I laughed, feeling truly happy for the first time in years. Whatever you want, sweetheart, whatever you want. As we drove away, I noticed Ethan in the rearview mirror watching us leave. I owed him more than I could ever repay, but that was a conversation for another time. For the time being, I had a daughter to spoil, a life to rebuild, and a future that for the first time in a long time appeared hopeful. Months passed and life gradually settled into a new normal. The media frenzy over the Thompson affair, as they called it, had finally subsided. Victoria and I had relocated to a new home, seeking a fresh start away from the painful memories of our previous lives. I was sitting in my home office reviewing some contracts when my phone went off. A text message from Ethan. Turn on the news now, frowning. I flipped on the television. Crystal's face filled the entire screen. Her one perfect makeup is now gone and her designer clothes have been replaced by a prison jumpsuit. The anchor announced breaking news. Laura Thompson, a convicted conspirator in the infamous Thompson affair, has made a full confession that implicates several high-profile individuals in a large-scale financial fraud scheme. I leaned back in my chair, a wave of emotion washing over me. Part of me was pleased to see Laura face the consequences of her actions, but there was another part which one tried to ignore. I felt a twinge of regret, but also a sense of melancholy about what could have been. My thoughts were interrupted by a knock on the door. Come inside. I called Victoria and her eyes were bright. Daddy, can we go to the park? You promised we practice soccer. I smiled, putting thoughts of Laura aside. Of course, Princess, let me finish up here. As Victoria went to get ready, I returned my attention to the television. Laura was speaking now, her voice trembles. I made horrible mistakes. She said, staring directly into the camera. I harmed people I claimed to love. If I could go back and change everything I would, but I can't. All I can do now is speak the truth and accept the consequences. I turned off the television, sighing deeply. The truth. What a simple concept. But it had almost destroyed us all. Later, at the park, I watched Victoria chase a soccer ball, her laughter echoing across the field. Ethan jogged up, feeling slightly out of breath. I apologize for being late. He panted. Work has been crazy since the news broke. I nodded, my gaze fixed on Victoria. What is the fallout? Ethan shook his head. It's huge. Crystal's testimony has opened a whole can of worms, arrests and indictments. It's like dominoes falling. I turned to face both him and us. Are we in the clear? Completely. Ethan reassured me. Detective Harris called to apologize for respecting you. He suggested you consider a career in law enforcement. I laughed. The sound was rusty but genuine. I think I've had enough excitement for a lifetime. Ethan clapped my shoulder. I can't argue with that. So what comes next for Alex Thompson? I watched Victoria score against an imaginary goalkeeper. Her arms rose in triumph. Honestly, I'm not sure, but for the first time in a long time I am excited to find out. We fell into a comfortable silence. The afternoon sun warmed against our faces. After a while, Ethan spoke again. His tone unusually hesitant. Please explain everything that happened. I know I didn't always make the best decisions. If I let you down in any way. I shook my head and ended the conversation. Ethan, you were there when it mattered. I wouldn't have gotten through without you. Ethan nodded, relief visible in his eyes. Still, if you ever need anything. Actually, I replied, a smile tugging on my lips. Victoria has requested one thing in particular, darkness. Do you think you could help me choose one? Ethan laughed. The tension is broken. A dog, that is it. After everything we'd gone through, I shrugged. What shall I say? My priorities have changed. We walked over to join Victoria's spontaneous soccer game. I felt a sense of calm come over me. The previous few months had been a crucible, erasing everything I thought I knew about my life, marriage, and even myself. But from the ashes something new had emerged, a stronger relationship with my daughter, a deeper appreciation for genuine friendship, as well as a resolve to never take for granted the things that truly mattered. The road ahead would not be easy. There were still wounds to be healed, trust in the ability to rebuild. But for the first time since the nightmare began, I felt prepared to face whatever came next. Victoria's small hand slipped into mine, her face beaming up at me, and I knew we'd face whatever challenges lay ahead together, and that was all that mattered. We left the park as the sun was setting, casting long shadows on the grass. Victoria skipped ahead, excitedly discussing the dog we had promised to consider. Ethan stayed back, matching my slower pace. You understand, he said quietly. I've been reflecting on what you said earlier about priorities changing. I looked at him, curious. Oh, he nodded with a thoughtful expression. Maybe it's time for me to make some changes, to settle down, start a family, all the cloak and dagger stuff. It takes a toll. You know, I laughed, recalling the adrenaline-fueled days of our recent past. Yes, it does, my friend. Yes, it does. As we approached the car, Victoria turned to us, her eyes bright. Can Uncle Ethan come to dinner, please, Daddy? I looked at Ethan, raising an eyebrow in question. He grinned and shrugged. Okay, if the lady insists. So as the last light of the day faded, we drove home together, a family forged in fire, stronger for having survived the storm. The future remained uncertain, but one thing was certain: whatever came next, we'd meet it head-on with the unbreakable bond of trust and loyalty that we'd worked so hard to establish. As I looked in the rearview mirror and saw Victoria's excited conversation with Ethan, I felt a surge of determination. The past had attempted to break us, but we had emerged victorious, and now it was time to begin a new chapter, one full of hope, love, and the promise of better days ahead. Thank you for tuning in. If you enjoyed this episode of the story, please give it a like, and don't forget to subscribe to get notifications for updates.